Greetings, adventurers. Frost back, and today I want to talk about what we need to do to prepare ourselves for the release of Naxxramas. And there are a lot of things that we need to do. And the first thing up is your Argent Dawn rep. So you don't need a lot of Argent Dawn rep. You only need to get honored technically to get attuned to Naxx. And there's some payments that you have to make, and the payments become cheaper and cheaper as you get higher and higher. So at Honored, you pay 60 gold, 5 Arcane Crystals, 2 Nexus Crystals, and 1 Righteous Orb, and this is a one-time fee. At Revered, you pay 30 gold, 2 Arcane Crystals, and 1 Nexus Crystal, and at Exalted, it is free. I recommend doing either Honored or Revered because it takes a long time to farm this rep, and the materials really aren't that much. So if you don't already have the rep, or if you're already at Honored or Revered, you're pretty much good. I wouldn't recommend farming Exalted because you only get rep from like boss kills and stuff like that and turn-ins, so it takes a really long time to get Exalted. Definitely not worth the like 150 gold you save. Next up is your T3 requirements for your material requirements for your gear. So when you get a token in Naxx, the way you get it is you have to complete a quest and you turn in materials for the item along with the token to get the item. And so these are all the totals for all the different classes. As you can see, some classes need a ton. So if you're planning on getting your full T3 set, you should start preparing those now if you haven't already. Then next up, you're going to want to make sure you have a lot of consumables prepared. So protection potions are the first ones that should come to mind. You need shadow prots, you need nature prots, you need frost prots, you need arcane prots. You need almost every protection potion outside of fire, which you'll still be using some fire for like the other raids, assuming you're still doing those. And then you're also obviously going to want to get your other general consumes, greater arcane elixirs, mongoose, flasks, food buff, all that stuff. You want to have everything prepared because Naxx does have DPS checks and stuff like that. The more consumables you use, the easier it is to raid. And then also just have extra spending gold to be able to buy stuff that you may not have. It's always good to just go into a new patch with a lot of extra stockpile of consumables and gold, just so that you don't have to worry about farming when you're potentially already have a lot of other stuff going on, right? Now, another thing that you're going to want to prepare, considering how many consumables, how many gear sets you're bringing, whether you're a warrior or a mage, whatever, you're bringing a ton of stuff and your bags are pretty messy. So you're going to want to get 4 18-slot bags if you don't already have them. Obviously, you can get them from Onyxia, you can get them from ZG, and then there's a third way. You can also get bottomless bags, which take 12 mooncloth, 8 bolts of rune cloth, 2 large brilliant shards, and 2 core leather. So the main cost is 12 rune cloth. So if you're going to G-bids, most of the time bags are G-bid and Oni and ZG or whatever. Don't pay more than the price of 12 mooncloth on your server plus maybe like 20 gold, right? And you'll save yourself some money there. I personally have already crafted 3 bottomless bags, and I'll probably be crafting a 4th if I cannot get a cheap one from Onyxia, since most people are paying like 400 gold for Onyxia bags, whereas I'm just paying 260 gold with mooncloth. So I highly recommend just doing bottomless bags. Then next up is Frost Resist. So originally, when we first played the PTR, Saffron was doing a ton of damage. Her damage tick was ticking every 1 second, so it was very brutal. However, Blizzard came out in a blue post and they said that they changed it to only tick every 1 second, and that's the way it's supposed to be, and that it was, or sorry, to tick every 2 seconds instead of every 1 second, and that it was a bug that it was ticking every 1 second. So we do not need as much frost resist as we originally thought. You're still going to want to have some, especially for the first like week or two. So what we're planning on doing is you want to have around 50 to 100 frost resist unbuffed, right? So without jujus on, without your totem down or your frost aura or any of that, just from your gear, you want to have 50 to 100. And you don't want to be losing too many stats, right? Like you don't want to be dumping some of your best items for like 15 frost resist, because the less damage you do, the longer the fight is. The longer the fight is, the more you have to get healed. So you don't want to dump a ton of stuff. Then Warriors, obviously Diamond Flask is going to be amazing for that, so that we'll talk about that later. But yeah, so just look out for some green pieces on the auction house. Like I got a pair of boots and gloves that are very high frost resist, because losing those slots isn't too brutal on my warrior. I picked up an 18 frost resist ring, which because losing one of the ring slots isn't too bad. Dropping Coaf. Bracers is a good one. There's some 15 frost resist bracers from Stratholme. Mages there and casters, there's a wand. Wand is obviously also a good slot. There is a neck from a rare that spawns at the Elemental Invasion in Winter Spring. That neck is very good. So just try and get the better pieces that you can. Obviously the best pieces are the epic pieces that come out once Naxx drops, but I'm talking about for prior to going into Naxx. You can't really prepare those. Yeah, you can prepare all the materials for those, which I have prepared the materials for those, but you're still going to have to farm the frozen runes, and the frozen runes you cannot get until Naxx is actually out. Then next up, after you have your frost resist gear done, there's a few frost resist consumables you're going to want to get. So you're going to want to get some chill wind echoes. They give you Juju chills, give you 15 frost resist. Those are good. There's also some enchants, like you can get the Argent Dawn shoulder enchant. There's a back enchant for 5 frost resist, and there is also ice deflectors. Ice deflectors are an engineering item. They have a 15-minute cooldown. They're not amazing, but it does block 600 frost damage, so it is something that you can add on there, and it doesn't share a cooldown with anything. So they're worth to have, right? Might as well. Then the next thing that you can prepare, if you really want to prepare a lot of stuff for your frost resist set prior to Naxx, is you can have materials ready for turn-ins. So there's a 10 frost resist helm and leg enchant. You need to have 10 insignias, and the insignias, you get them the same way the CC rep turn-ins work, or at least it's similar. The way that you get a writ, which is gives you an RNG chance of giving you the 1 in like 10 or so different things that you can turn in to get an insignia. And to get that writ, you need to turn in a Argent Dawn rep token. So you want to save your rep tokens, don't turn them in for rep, and then you can turn them in for these writs. And then I have a list of all the different writs that you can get for the different materials. These are very expensive. I'm personally not going for them. I think it's better off to try and get better frost resist pieces to use. These are the kind of things that you would want to use for your epic pieces once you get those. Now there is another option where you don't need to actually spend a lot of gold. So there's 3 repeatable quests: Bone Fragments, Savage Fronds, Crypt Fiend Parts, 30 of each, whichever one you want to do. And that's another way to get an insignia, but you cannot farm these items until after Naxx patches out. So that's another way that you can farm them, and you can avoid doing these very expensive turn-ins, like 120 dense stone, and that's one of the cheap ones, right? There's Flask of Petrification as a turn-in. 3 Imperial Plate Chest, which is like 120 thorium bars. Like, all the turn-ins are rather expensive, so I wouldn't recommend doing the material turn-ins. However, it is an option if you really want to fully min-max your Sapphiron set. Then next up, when phase 6 drops, we're gonna have 2 days prior to Naxx coming out, right? And that is going to give us time to do the Scourge Invasion. During the Scourge Invasion, there's some stuff that's going to be going on. There's going to be some necropolises that are spawning in the sky, and some crystals that spawn in zones that spawn undead around them. Now these undead mobs, or ghouls, will drop necrotic runes. These necrotic runes can then be turned in to get consecrated sharpening stones, which give you 100 attack power against undead, and also blessed wizard oil, which gives you 60 spell power against undead. You're going to want to farm as many of these as you can possibly can. As many as you possibly can. Like, just do not stop for 2 days straight, right? Until you have to buff for Naxx. Why? Not only is it BIS for Naxx, obviously, they're amazing for Naxx, They're also limited time that you can farm them, because once the server destroys too many of the runes, you can no longer farm the mobs that drop necrotic runes. Now, there is a way to keep them going forever. You don't have to destroy the crystal when you farm the area. After you kill all the zombies, it'll spawn 4 caster mobs that will heal the crystal. There's 2 things you can do. You can either kill them and then they don't heal the crystal, or you can talk to them and you can turn in a necrotic rune to each of them, and then they will spawn this big guy. When you kill him, he drops 30 necrotic runes and gives you a chance to get one of the undead cleansing items, one of the blue items. That's the 2% damage sets. And there's only a limited number of times that these things can be killed, and once there's enough of them killed, they'd stop spawning, right? So you can actually just sit there and let the ghouls respawn and farm necrotic runes that way. And it takes 8 necrotic runes for each blessed wizard oil or sharpening stone. And these are also bis for TBC. That's right. Anytime you're killing an undead mob in TBC, this will be the best oil and best sharpening stone that you can put on your weapons. Sharpening stone is obviously less important. You're not dual wielding as often, but you want to farm a lot of these. These are very, very, very strong items. Don't sleep on these items. You're going to regret it if you do. Kind of like Valentine's candies, right? Now, there is another thing I should mention, and that is during the Scourge invasion, when you kill the crystal, it will give you a buff that increases your damage by 10% for 30 minutes. It stacks with DMF. It stacks with the Silithus buff. So that will be a new thing. Thank you. Another new world buff that is entering the game. Thank you, Blizzard. Next up, Holy Water. This is a new bis consumable for Naxxramas. Why? Scales 1-to-1 off spell power. So mages, warlocks, healers, this consumable's amazing. You're going to be doing a ton of damage when you use it. 1 minute cooldown. You're just going to be chucking them all the time during trash. And warriors and rogues, you do not get to miss out on this. Even though it has a 1-to-1 spell power ratio, which obviously we don't have, it still hits harder than Dense Dynamite and Sapper. Actually, Sapper still hits harder, but it hits harder than Dense Dynamite. So, melee, casters, healers, tanks, everybody, get your ass in Strat Undead and start farming that Holy Water. And this is where your rep kind of ends up going pretty high, right? Like I ended up farming Revered because I was farming a bunch of Holy Water, and I still could farm more Holy Water if I want to like realistically have enough for the rest of Naxx, right? I have 80 right now. That is plenty for a first run, plenty for progging, so I won't run out. However, after that, I'm going to need more. It's going to be an item that you probably use only in speedruns and not in off weeks. You'd rather just use Dense Dynamite in off weeks. But if you're trying to min-max your DPS in Naxx, Holy Water is bis, so you're going to have to farm that. And the next thing you're going to want to prepare, and this is more of a guild thing to prepare rather than a personal thing, and that is you need new summoner alts. You need new summoner spots. There's 2 new buffs obviously coming in. One is you can get a buff from one of these crystals when you destroy it to get 10% damage for 30 minutes that we just talked about. So you're probably going to want to have a summoner to bring people out to there to get that. Next, there's the Silithus buff. That's 5% damage for 30 minutes. Let me double check. I can't remember if it's it's for 30 minutes. So you're going to want to have someone that can summon you down there to be able to pick up that buff. That's 2 more summoners. And then the third one, you're going to want a new Naxxramas summoning spot, right? So you're going to want to do some investigation, find a spot where you can summon, whether you need to run in, whether it's on top of the necropolis or wherever you find your spot. That's going to be a third spot that you're going to want to have a summoner set up. So more summoners to level, more stuff to do. Now, that's all for what covers everybody. I'm going to go into more specific stuff now for what people need to prepare for Naxxramas, and the first is Mage. If you want to do the solo farm, duo farm, the trash farm for Naxx, MP5 set is nice to have. It's not required if you're doing a duo farm. You can literally drop combat and drink. You can run, you can die, run back and drink. There's a lot of options that you can do to get around it if you're not solo, but if you want to solo it, which I don't recommend in terms of speed, but MP5 is good. And then I still think MP5 will be the fastest for killing them, even as a duo, trio, quad, 5 mages. If you can just sit there and spam Blizzard endlessly, you're going to be able to kill them faster than if you're having to constantly go and reset and drink and do whatever. Next up, warriors. You have the most to prepare for Naxxramas. The first thing is your Diamond Flask set. You're going to want to have a banging Diamond Flask set. Every piece, very nice, enchanted, good to go. At least 600 healing, probably 700, 800 if you can, right? That's because Loatheb, it'll be amazing. Sapphiron, it'll be amazing. Basically, any fight where you're taking damage, honestly, you're gonna want to use it. Like, there's just no reason not to. If you were a soaker on Patchwork, that's going to be an amazing item to use. So yeah, Diamond Flask set, make it, it's going to be very good. And then going off healing, another item that's very good for healing for warriors. It's not even only for warriors, this is for all melee, so rogues too. Dark Moon card, Heroism, your warlord's deck. Every time you hit, you have a chance to heal for 120 to 180, and it can crit. This gives you some sustained healing. This is the kind of item that might be good for something like Loatheb, where you don't need to get healed at all and you fully heal yourself with just this trinket. Maybe not so much for warriors if they already have the Diamond Flask set, but more for rogues on that fight. But I still personally have this item on my warrior. I think it's something that could be good, and it's better off to get now when it's cheap rather than in Naxx if it becomes BIS when it's very, very expensive. So go ahead and go make that set. Next thing for warriors is your reel. Obviously not everyone's going to need a reel, but having a reel on, if you're a warrior, is good just in case you do need to tank and taunt a 4 horseman. So yeah, just go to ZG and get that if you haven't already gotten that. Most warriors already have it. And then the last thing you're going to want to get as a warrior, again, not every warrior needs to get this, but at least 4 in your raid will, and that is a defensive set for Patchwork. You don't necessarily need to be full defensive, but you're gonna want to have a good amount of defensive gear, right? Wearing T2 helmet, any pieces that don't have a lot of stamina or at least agility on them, you're probably going to want to replace with another piece that's a little bit more defensive, because the Hateful Strikes do hurt a lot. But other than that, there's really not much more to prepare other than you looking up the fights and being familiar with what is going to be happening in Naxx, so that you aren't going into it completely fresh. It is something also I have to do. I mean, if you've raided Naxx in Wrath, which I have quite a bit, you know for the most part all the fights, right? Like I did PTR on them all, and they're all pretty much exactly the same as the Wrath one. So if you've done Wrath and you're comfortable with that, you're probably good. I would still recommend just looking it up and maybe watching like a POV of a 40-man Naxx playthrough. Or maybe someone talking through the PTR specifically and not necessarily a private server one, because there are some differences. But just keep in mind, one of the big changes is that Sapphiron will not be doing as much damage as she did on the PTR. It'll be about half. But that concludes my Naxxramas preparation guide. Thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate it. Please like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you all on Azeroth.